Hello and welcome to another episode of the Accounting Insiders Podcast. My name is Gary DeHart and I am the host of the Accounting Insiders Podcast and publisher, co-founder of Insightful Accountant. And my guest today is Kevin Sisk. He's the president of Bill360. Kevin, welcome. Thanks for taking some time and joining me on the podcast here.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Yeah, very good. And so on your website, and again, this company's Bill360. And on the website, it says, no, actually, this was on the LinkedIn profile. I think the website may have said something different, but it says from invoice to deposit and everything in between.
That's right.
So that's it in a nutshell. So that's all we had to talk about. So we're done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over. There you go.
Yeah.
You
All right. So just high level, what we're going to do here is just kind of walk through, I'm going to have you just give a little bit of your background, and then we're just going to walk through some questions, your background, kind of your history in this field, in this business of accounting or accounting related technology, and then a little bit about the product, and then kind of what's on the roadmap, what's in it for accountants and or their clients, and then wrap up with, again, roadmap, and then where people can find you. So before we dive into that, a little bit of your background that I saw, right? Mostly heavy payments. And I'm going to get you to go deeper here, but I'm baiting you here for a little question. So I saw that you're a captain in the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's because you couldn't get into the Army.
That's very nice. Very nice. Exactly. Yeah, I've had
So
people say, "Hey, that's for the guys who can't read and write. We could send them to the Marine Corps,"
exactly.
But it's always a healthy rivalry. One of my bosses and mentors was a West Point graduate, and so it's nonstop.
I'm sure. Yes, I was in the National Guard. I was never active, but
Yeah.
so I was a first lieutenant in the National Guard. My only regret from all of that, and I was an infantry officer, my only regret is that I didn't stay long enough to become a captain. I didn't get
Yeah.
a command. And kind of in hindsight, looking back, I'm like, you know what, 3 more years, I would have gotten a command and then moved on. And now my oldest son is he's a corporal in the Army Reserves
Oh, that's
and
great.
yeah, and psychological operations.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm a big fan of all the branches. I always tell people
Absolutely.
it did more for me than I did for them, but and I sort of joined on a whim, and I enlisted. And then after going through that process, spending a little time as an enlisted guy, I didn't know the difference between a corporal and a colonel, and I didn't know what the pay chart was. But once
Yeah.
I got it and I figured those things out, then I applied to OCS and served my active time as a junior military officer.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny. So I joined the Guard in '86, enlisted, and
oh,
then
really?
went through the state's OCS program
Okay.
and got commissioned in '89, like December
Okay.
of '89 maybe, and then
So
went through the officer's basic course. Yeah, we're pretty similar
I was commissioned in
timeline.
'88, but I enlisted in January of '86.
Yeah, I enlisted October '86. So
Yeah.
fun
Oh,
times. And so let's go with that. So your background, let's talk a little bit about your work background, and then I'm going to spin it back around to the Marine Corps with the question is, what'd you learn in the Corps that you brought to business? And you can answer that now, or you can answer it when you tell a little bit about your work background.
yeah, maybe I'll sort of
Fine.
come back around on that. But
Yeah.
so my work background, and I like to say it's really my only civilian work that I've been in since I left the military, which has been payments. And when I first joined, it was a company called First USA that some of you may know if you've been around for a while, but ultimately that became part of JP Morgan Chase. So
Okay.
16 years effectively with JP Morgan Chase, all in payments in various roles and all increasing responsibility there. And ultimately, running sales, service, client relations, operations, all those kinds of things, and learn an enormous amount and being part of a big organization like that. Then I spent time at First Data, that now is Fiserv. I'm sure some people are familiar with that name,
Yeah.
FISERV. not
Yep.
Fiserv, because a lot of people confuse the two if you say it fast. So spent about 4 years at Fiserv in various roles, but the last one was a joint venture between Fiserv and Bank of America as the chief operations officer for that JV, and it was a very large payments company, but it was owned by Bank of America and Fiserv.
Did you ever spend any time here in the Atlanta area with Fiserv?
Yes, I spent mm, every other week there.
Oh,
From
really?
from I live in Dallas, but now I spend a lot of time in Tampa. But and my wife and I actually, when we first my wife, by the way, was a Marine, so a lot of people don't know that,
All
and I actually talked her into joining, if you can believe that, and we
right.
were boyfriend girlfriend then, and she actually did it. So, but she did
Well,
really,
go places, see great things.
she did very well. They wanted her, she had all kinds of people wanting to give her all kinds of things to stay in, but
Yeah.
but anyway, we actually lived in Atlanta for 2 years.
Okay.
We separated from the service. But while I was at first date, I was back and forth between Dallas and Atlanta a lot.
Okay.
So um, and then with Bank of America Merchant Services, it was, we had a host of locations: New York, Charlotte, Washington State, South Florida. So spent time in all those areas too, on the road a lot. And but I essentially I came to the end of that journey and was kind of in the, what am I going to do next? And not really attached to anything, and talking to my wife like,
Okay.
are you going to
Done.
work? You want? I'm sorry.
All right, so we had a little technical difficulties there. So you were saying you transitioned out of Fiserv.
Yeah, and so it was kind of a wide open field, right? I was not really attached to doing anything. What was I going to work? Was I going to stay in payments? All those things, run through all those thoughts. I actually, talking to my wife, I said, one of the things I really, really loved as a kid, and still do, were trains. I go, what would it take to be a train engineer, a locomotive driving a freight train across, I was just thinking, hey, if you're not worried about money and
Right.
you're just saying, what would I like to do that would be really fun? And so I actually thought about that for a little while. And then a friend of mine who's the mentor that I mentioned, the West Point guy, Dan, and we stay in regular contact, and he'd reached out to me and he says, hey, it's one of those, what are you doing kind of thing. And that's when he told me that I should talk to, and we'll get to Bill360, a gentleman, Paul Hunter, the CEO of Bill360, who I've known since 2003, 2002, somewhere around. He was a customer of
Okay.
mine at JP Morgan. And, and so Dan was like, hey, you should give Paul a call. And Dan is on the board. He's got this really interesting company and he's doing some stuff. So anyway, so Paul and I reconnected, started talking back and forth, covered all the miles that have, transgressed since we'd last spoken. And then I came out, visited him, and was back and forth a little bit, evaluating, you know, hey, is this something I want to spend time in? And the more I dug into it, the more I was compelled. And part of that is because of my background in payments and understanding, and the side of the table that I sat on a lot of those, versus what Bill360 has to offer, and
Hmm.
what the problem that Bill360 is trying to solve and is solving. Then I just decided that, hey, I have to be part of this mission, because it's something that is, from our perspective, something very untouched in accounts receivable automation, but
Yeah.
very difficult. It's untouched because it's very difficult, because as you'd imagine, there's an enormous amount of variation in small and medium-sized businesses and how people manage that. And then just the technology, 5, 10 years ago, just it wasn't there to attack this problem. And so now we're into something that, very few are in, and we're in it in a way that we think we're the only ones, because since we're, a payment facilitator, that we actually move the money. So we bring the automation, but then we're actually controlling the payment. There's some people who talk about automation, and I, air quote that, but then they're not facilitating the payment, and that becomes a problem. That's just another entity that somebody has to deal with. And in particular, we're focused in the B2B space,
Yeah.
businesses on to businesses, that's AR, that's not generally consumer. Um, and the transaction sizes tend to be much larger than your typical consumer. And in the normal payments ecosystem, those outsized transactions tend to get held up from in funding cycles from a risk management standpoint. And the way we built this platform intentionally was to take that friction out. So we know who the
Okay.
buyer is, we know who the seller is, we know we got all their payment or their invoicing history, we know what they buy, when they buy it, how long they've been customers, all those things. So when a payment, and I think our biggest transaction to date was right at $150,000.
Okay.
That's for us, it's not an issue because we know everything about that transaction. Where in the normal payment flow, in a normal processor, they only see one side of that transaction. So if a large transaction comes through like that, they're not going to let that go, right? They're going to
Right.
hold that, make sure that's legit before that money's gone and disappears. So, and that creates friction in the bit because this is all about cash flow acceleration, shrinking day sales outstanding, all those things. And so those outsized transactions, which are inherent in the B2B space, you have to have an answer for that.
Yeah.
And our answer is that being that full risk payment facilitator, so you control that payment, is an important part. But you
Okay.
have to have the automation to make everything easy and make it work too, not just the moving the money part, but we're that all-in-one platform.
Right.
So that's how I
Okay.
got to Bill360. I know that's kind of a
Yeah. No,
roundabout.
the Dan guy that went to West Point, he didn't ever work for like Source Media, did he? Like in a publishing company?
No, no,
All
no. His
right.
last name
Yeah.
was Sharon, Charron, but he was no, he was a president of Payment Tech, and then he was an executive Fiserv, for all their global business
Okay.
solutions. Yeah, so
Yeah. Source Media had a lot of products that were in that payments world,
okay.
like
Yeah,
ISO. I can't even
right.
remember the titles, but
Yeah, oh yeah.
they
Oh,
owned all of those. Yeah.
I my name's on all those lists too, and I get
Yeah.
all still.
Still coming to you, right? Like, even though I
Um,
unsubscribed
yeah.
6 years ago.
You unsubscribe and you get three.
Yes, right. That's right. Exactly. So, all right. So, lessons you learned in the core that you brought to business, and then let's dive a little deeper on the product itself.
So, so now I'll try to put that in a nutshell, and as being, you wore the uniform as well. And I like to think that, hey, fundamentally, we're all those core values are all, pretty much the same. But the one thing the Marine Corps really, really pushes on everybody is the 14 leadership traits and the 11 leadership principles. And I'm not going to tick through all of those.
Yeah.
But it is a thing that's that's really pushed hard because whether you're a corporal or a colonel, right, you always have to, as you know, in the military, you got to be ready to take the job above you or below you at any moment, and to be always thinking, right, not just, hey, this is my lane, but how does what I'm doing in this lane affect everybody else, and trying to have that whole sort of the battlefield perspective.
Yeah.
But really it's the perseverance. and
Hmm.
and, and I just found that in the Marine Corps, they both in boot camp and officer candidate school, and then I was deployed, in the first Gulf, that you know one foot in front of the other, and never giving up has just been a thing. And I try to even impart with my kids is that 50% of the battle is just the willingness to show up,
Yeah.
even as hard as it may be, and even if you're not prepared, even if you're hurt, you still continue to show up. And in business, it's the same thing, is that, hey, there's times it's really tough. And those are the times, it's not to be cliche, but those are the time when we all kind of find out what we're made of. And that's where the
Yeah.
military, I think, that the sort of the purpose of boot camp and officer camp is so people can learn that about themselves. But ultimately, it's just the grit and perseverance, which is where just most people just tap out. And I found that after I came off of active duty into the civilian world, in making that transition, that where I thought people were going to compete. For example, I had this, I started at First USA, that became part of Chase. My first job was a tech support rep. So, I'm on the phone troubleshooting basically. And then an opportunity came up to be a senior tech rep. And there's just one spot, but I'd only been on the floor for, 3 or 4 months. And there was, 10, 15 people that had been on there a lot longer than me. And so I'm asking people, hey, are you going to apply right for the senior tech? And there was only one other person that I
Hmm.
asked, and I couldn't believe it. I was shocked because I'm thinking, what? Why would
Yeah.
they want to do it? Because in the military, as right, everybody's vying
Yeah.
for the next promotion or the next mission. You're constantly, it's ingrained, and you're hunting for that next opportunity for to learn and more responsibility. And I was just shocked about that. And it just sort of hit me that, hey, that's okay though.
Yeah.
And I think Jean Paul Getty said it, that the competition isn't amongst the 95%, it's amongst the five.
Hmm.
There's only the five that really is going to be really pushing that hard. And I think in business that's been, I found that to be very true too. It doesn't mean that the 95 are bad. It just means that
Right.
that they have a different lane, and they're on a different track. But
Yeah.
the 5% is where that perseverance, I think, is really shows. So
Yeah. And the 95 needs the five as much as the
right,
five needs the 95, right? I
exactly.
mean,
Very
yeah.
symbiotic.
Yeah, it was funny. I was on somebody's podcast the other day, and he asked, "Oh, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?" or something like that. I'm like, "Well, I don't know that I can say it's advice, but it was two things from leadership principles, and it was, seek responsibility and take responsibility for your actions. I'm sure the
Yeah.
Marine Corps has something similar,
Oh yeah.
and the other one, keep your troops informed, right? Just those two things. If you can do that, in a company, then you know everybody's going to understand where we're going, and just give
Right.
them some guidance.
And
So
and it sounds easy. You say that really quick, but it's amazing how often it doesn't happen.
yeah,
Those things don't happen.
yeah.
And so anyway, but yeah, totally agree.
So let's jump into product. So what is Bill360? You touched on it a little bit, but like, what is it?
So Bill360, so we're a purpose-built B2B software AR automation company. And I know that's a mouthful, but but I'm going to emphasize a couple of things in there. Purpose-built, because there are some companies who weren't purpose-built, but they make an attempt at some of the things that we solve.
Okay,
So we say that they're primarily B2C focused companies that sort of reskin that and present it as a B2B solution. We're not that, right? So we've built, and our origins come from B2B payments. In the previous company, Paul started, who was my customer at the time, was the focus on B2B. So this isn't new to us.
yeah,
The origin, I mean, building this from the ground up with that in mind, that we're focused and taking the friction out of those businesses that do business with other businesses from the very beginning. We're not reskinning or retooling anything, repurposing any B2C. So everything that we've done is with that in mind,
okay,
including, which some people, in today's day, live customer success support, which I know some ways you go, okay. But when you try to find it at some of these other companies, it's hard to even find a phone number because they want to use chat, they want to use email, they
yeah,
want to use a lot of things other than a human being talking to you. But again, we felt that core to businesses doing businesses, they deserve live support when they need it. Now we think we've built a pretty good platform that doesn't need a lot of support, and it doesn't, but from time to time there's things that people just want to talk to you about, and we're there. And
Right.
it's an important cornerstone. But the essence of the software is basically taking the, accounts receivable. There's tons and tons and tons of accounts payable companies, and it's a little bit easier thing to solve for. The accounts receivable, where it puts the supplier, what we call a supplier, our direct customer, in the driver's seat, right? Whereas the AP company is a consumer, you're picking it, and then you want your supplier to then to try to say, okay, I'll accept, from that AP
Okay.
company. Well, we're giving the suppliers the opportunity to be in the driver's seat. And there's a lot of reasons, motivation for them to do that. But in the end, it's that last part of, just in business operation, it's always everybody's focused on sales, on service, on product innovation. And when it comes to getting paid, oh yeah, yeah, we got people who get the invoice out, and that's become sort of aged now. 10 years ago, people limp along, it's not a big deal. You can sell around it, you can innovate, you do all these other things, and that'll get caught up. Well, now is, there's a never-ending squeeze for efficiency. That accounts receivable piece is, certainly in the payment space, is kind of that last green pasture, because those are not only the biggest transactions on average, but a big chunk of that's still in paper checks.
Mm.
So, and there's a lot of, paper check fraud that we eliminate. But the other thing that's happening is there's a demographic movement. And so some of the people that have, the AR managers that have been in a lot of these roles for a very long time, there's the younger wave of people who are replacing them in a lot of these businesses, and that younger wave, and I can say that because I know I have kids that are 22 and 24. They've never received a check, let alone written one, and they just
Right.
don't
Yeah.
operate in that world. And so this younger demographic that's moving into these roles, their expectation is automation. Their
Right.
expectation isn't, hey, where's the spreadsheet and where's the checkbook and where are the stamps? That's that's not even in their sort of vocabulary or DNA.
Right.
So their expectation is innovation. And so you have this convergence of not only that, but just in the technology that's accelerated, where you can bring some standardization across multiple, small businesses in this space. And that's what we've done. And it basically, the things that used to create friction between, suppliers and buyers, aged receivables, customer friction. Hey, I got a call. This is one of my best customers, but he's always 30, 60, 90 days late. I hate to make the phone call, or I got to send the email, or when I'm making the phone call, I'm getting voicemail. So that, things that just inherently have put friction into that, we remove all that. The things with
Okay.
like the larger transactions, like I said, we remove all that. The automation between the two is with a lot of focus on the buyer too, not just our direct customer, but if you think of Amazon, and we use this a lot, is that Amazon sort of set that standard, right? If you go to any other website and it's not as easy as Amazon to pay, you sort of get frustrated in a manner of section. You're
Right.
like, "Oh, do I really want to do all this?" And so we put a lot of energy on our customer to make it super easy for them to buy, because we believe the easier we make it for them to, pay and to track their invoices and collaborate with that, it's going to make them stickier to that
Right.
customer. And that, that's a winning thing for everybody. But the essence of Bill360 is a purpose-built B2B platform, AR automation software company that make make billing and getting paid as easy as possible. And
So
as
that,
much autopilot too. There's a lot of
yeah.
autopilot in it too.
So can you say these are probably our top two or three problems that we solve? I mean, one I think you just said was eliminating that friction between me and my customer, right? Of having to call them and go, dude, I need my money, right? Uh, which has got to
Yeah,
be pretty big, right? Nobody wants to make
right.
that call.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then it's not only that, but then it's the um if they're not paying and then and they're not answering and you're having to follow up, so that does elevates the friction. But a lot of times it's just simply where somebody has a question, right? They get the invoice and they're like, oh, okay, well, I got a question on something. I'll get back to them. I'll call, and they don't, right? It goes on the stack and they don't, they're sitting in their inbox and they just don't get back to the question. Where Bill360 within the tool, right? We have a collaboration portal. So if they have a quick question, they just runs through the portal, the supplier gets it, and all that history stays with that transaction. So it's not, oh, let me go find it in that email, or who sent that email, let me go look for it, and oh, the person that sent it's not here anymore, do we have access to their email, all that
Mhm.
sort of stuff that goes on all resides within the tool. It's very easy, very intuitive. And then just accelerating cash flow, right? Because we all know, right, cash is king, and reporting revenues is one thing, but then collecting it, from a cash flow is another thing. And so, and to date on our portfolio, we're upwards of almost a 40% improvement in day sales outstanding for those people on the platform.
Wow. Okay.
And that's been big. And some of it's just because you automate things. So it's not like people say, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to be slow intentionally. It's just they're busy. A lot of things are
Yep.
happening. And so again, that's where we put a lot of focus on that buyer. How do we make it really, really easy for them to pay and to be reminded? And so therefore people now it just makes it easy. And we had one customer, in fact, who and she shared this with us, this is kind of a testimonial, is that they had a customer because once the buyer sets up their little portal, you know, they saves their wallet and all, they can make payments however they want, whether it's credit or ACH. But they called that AR clerk and said, hey, I'm trying to make a payment, but I can't make the payment. Well, it's because the supplier hadn't yet sent the invoice. So in other words, they were trying to pay before they even got an invoice deployed to them. Of course, the manager's like, well, send the invoice, get the invoice.
Right.
And so that's what we want, is like really easy for those buyers to pay. And because we fundamentally believe, most people want to pay on time. It's just like having that mechanism. And that's why we think this whole area of AR automation is really pretty fertile and green because of that. There's just not bringing standardization to that has been very hard.
Right.
And because in people, you can find the statistics. There's a lot of the average, the number of late payments on average, across the board is, it's always very high. But what we're finding is that it's again, it's not because people just want to be late pay. It's just been not super easy to do it.
Right. Yeah.
It's-
If you're not top of mind, well,
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not gonna pay you, right?
We make
I'm
that
gonna pay
easy.
the guy that's yeah, I'm gonna pay the guy that's bothering me the most.
Right. Standing here. Yeah, exactly.
And so, so let's bounce over to the target. I mean, the key, or who really is your customer? Is it the end user? Like our core audience is QuickBooks Pro advisors, the accounting, public accounting professionals, bookkeepers. Is your target key audience or your key customer? Is it the small business or is it the accounting pro or combination of the two?
Yeah, exactly. It's both.
Yeah,
And I would say just at large that our two clients that we talk about often are just that, as our partner clients
yeah,
should be like, small accounting firms or advisors, that they, because they obviously have an influence of a whole set of customers that they're interacting with daily.
yeah,
And then that end user client, the user of the platform. And we have customers who are that are partners, but they're direct customers. In other words, they use the tool for their own
yeah.
business, but then their customers, we have a partner relationship to help their customers too. So it's not like, hey, if you're a partner, you can't be a user.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
you can't be a partner, so they're interchangeable. But yeah, our primary focus is we have, software partnerships, accounting partnerships, and then the direct customer.
And I know you're exhibiting at Scaling New Heights coming up. I'm pretty sure you were at ZeroCon last year.
Right.
And are they direct integrations with those two products?
Yeah, yes, with QuickBooks and Xero, right. And so that's a good point. Is that so the other piece to that automation, right, is the deep integration that we have with, QuickBooks and Xero, and we have a couple other big accounting packages that are on the docket later
Okay.
this year. But those deep integrations are what is another important part of that automation is that so when people do pay, right? You make it easy for them to pay and you automate everything in between from communication to invoice deployment, all that. But the other thing is then reconciling back into the accounting platform. So as the AR clerk, there's no more posting the entries back into their accounting platform
Yeah.
that we're doing all that automatically. And we do that because we have that deep integration with QuickBooks and Xero. And that's an important, thing because it's also you where you're taking out the potential for human error, right? You take
Yeah.
the human out, and we're just passing data back and forth as it happens real time, and uh, and people love that, you know.
And I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going to ask it. So when something's integrated, like with QBO, with QuickBooks putting not all their, with Intuit putting so much effort and focus into enterprise,
Yeah,
um, is that a separate integration? Is it the same base tool, or how does that
yeah.
work? What does that look like?
It, it's the same, and
Okay.
so there are two components though. So there's the online, which is which includes the enterprise, but then there's the legacy desktop that a lot of us grew up on, right? Which is the get the floppy diskette and insert it
Right.
into and so we have a fair number of customers on QuickBooks Desktop. Now we all know that they're getting squeezed right into it, certainly
Yes.
with all those people to be on QBO. And it does make it easier from the integration because as soon as you move into somebody's environment, there's a lot of other risks at play that can sort of impact the performance. But nonetheless, we still do we're still integrated. So we handle desktop customers as well, and a lot of them we understand too have been if they're on desktop, right? They've usually been in business for a long time, and people they want all that data and they don't want to let go, and so this gives them automation that they that they just don't have an opportunity to get. And
Okay.
that's a big part that the QBD users do like.
Okay. Now you had mentioned, I don't know if it was while we were talking before we started recording or after, but just um, based on the way that your company is structured or all that the company does, you have a bit of a cost advantage. So is it fair to talk about what it costs, like to me as the accounting pro or as a business user?
Yeah, and it's really, some people say, "Hey, that seems awfully inexpensive for what you're getting," and it is. But so generally we have a very low SaaS. It's $10 a month, and so some people go, "What? $10 a month?" Like, my latest version of Angry Birds is like 12.99. You know, it's it's like how can you have all this? But what
That's
we
funny.
really do is since we move the money, so we're also a payments company, is that in most businesses are already accepting forms of credit and ACH. So we originate ACH transactions too. So we do ACH and we have embedded, you know, kind of like a buy now, pay later product. But we but because we do that, that we just essentially replace whoever they're using for their payments. And it's fundamentally that, all those costs are pretty much the same. So generally what we say to people is like it's pretty much the same fees you're paying to accept payments today plus $10, but you get a complete, easy to use, fully integrated automation suite that takes it saves people. I mean, in fact, we have one customer who said it saved her at least 15 hours a week.
Wow.
that she's not monkeying around with all the stuff we've been talking about, just the normal friction, day-to-day friction that's inherent in collecting aged
Right.
invoices.
Yeah.
We take all that out of the equation, bring them automation. It's fundamentally the same fees they're paying today, plus $10 for the SaaS fee. And what we do with the partners um, is that we just share in that revenue with them. So,
Okay.
so if you think of like many of the accountants, your listeners are, I'm sure they're all thinking, well, I got a customer right now who could use some cash flow improvement and some
Right.
automation in their collection. And so when that happens, we just share a piece of the revenue back to them. But I think that's one of the things where one of the things just in the accounting, and I know I'm sure you're keenly aware of this, is the private equity folks have been moving into the space, into the accounting space, over the
Yeah.
last 18 months. They're buying firms up and consolidating,
Hmm.
but obviously they're doing that, one, to get scale, and two, to bring a lot of efficiency, not only in like the accounting practice, but then just technology of how are we interacting with customers, what other value can we bring to customers beyond just sort of the traditional accounting. And so and that's where we think we fit nicely as a partnership with firms and the advisors, is that we bring that level of, one, a new item in their tech stack, but something that really makes a difference, that's been very, very hard for people to find an answer to. And so it's a great fit. So for the firm, it makes them cutting edge, and they're bringing a real, so that's fundamentally like no cost, right? Because they're already paying
Right.
fees for their so they're bringing something that's a real answer to a real problem. That's very easy to use, very quick to set up, all those things, and then they can share in that revenue if they would. Some do and some
Yeah.
don't. It's just, it depends, but
Yeah.
we
Depends how
always,
they're structured.
yeah, exactly. We
Yeah.
always make it available to them.
Okay. I think I was trying to, I meant to look before we started recording to see if we have a piece that we put on our site called Advisor Alliance. And it's where we basically feature various partner programs. I
Mhm.
think we have done one on you guys. So, but I need to double check that.
Okay.
If not, we need to do one. I'll
Yeah,
connect with
we'd
Anton
love to.
after this.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's wrap this up with three quick things. One is what's on the roadmap.
Okay.
And you mentioned one, there's some other general ledgers
Yeah.
that you're working with.
So yeah, so I'll just a couple things, just is that we have the most imminent thing that we're going to be is surcharging, and that can be a little industry jargonish, but what that really means is that gives, and in the B2B space, right? If you think of like manufacturing or some of these things where those are tight margin businesses to begin with,
Yeah,
and so traditionally, like they don't want to accept card payments. They're traditionally ACH or paper check. And our philosophy is we want to present as many payment options as possible, right? And let the buyer decide. Well, if you're the supplier and you're running a 7% margin business, the last thing you want to do is pay payment fees. Well, surcharging allows that supplier to push that fee to the buyer. And
yeah,
you've probably experienced it. You go to a retail place and they charge you if you use a credit card, or some people just put it on the invoice, hey, it's 3% or 4%. And so we're rolling that product out in July, that will enable our suppliers, and they can pick and choose when they do it. So but that's a big, especially in the B2B thing, that's a very highly sought after feature.
yeah,
And then we're doing a lot of work, obviously, in the AI, and we haven't really talked about that, but we're neck deep into that, not only internally, just in improving everything we do internally and using it in every way possible for our coders or QA or test engineer, everybody. We're all using it, and I use it for research. I know Paul, our CEO, he uses it a lot for research and comparisons and stuff. So internally we're doing it, but then customer facing, we've got a whole roadmap journey, that getting to that place of where we're going to make it easier and easier and easier for those CFOs, those controllers, to make predictive decisions and not reactionary ones based on
Mm-hmm.
the behaviors of their underlying customers and all the data that we're capturing, so they can make predictive, not only on behavior or credit risk and things like that, but also their cash flow forecasting, making that better. But then taking it one level up to where we identify things based on, a portfolio of the Bill360 portfolio and patterns and behaviors, and then making a recommendation. If you do X, Y, and Z, if you use these features within Bill360, this is what's going to happen to your day sales outstanding. So we're going to have that predicted. But then also, then that last level is then, would you like the machine to then implement those strategies and let them,
Mm-hmm.
so we present them, hey, if you do these things, this is what's going to happen to your day sales outstanding. And would you then like us to implement those? So that's on the near term horizon for us too, on the
Okay.
AI front. So
Okay. Fantastic. And
yeah.
then is there training? Is it even, I mean, is there training needed? But what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Yes and no. Yes, we do have training, absolutely. And but some people, and we've had some people who've synced their platform on their own and started sending out invoices and getting payments, and you know, some people have that tech. It's not complicated, but we like to take people through it just so we can demonstrate some of the features too, and some of the things really to get them started quickly. But the sync process on QBO users is, I mean, once we connect, it's 20, 30 seconds, and we're sucking in 18 months worth of past history, so that they immediately, once they sync, they immediately get a dashboard of all their behaviors of their customers from the last 18 months. So it's
Yeah.
not, hey, you start with us and you've got nothing to show. It's like you start with us, now you've got a whole dashboard that's very illuminating to people too. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. It's because they think they know, but till you see
Right.
it, in that color dashboard, then it's fun to be on those calls. For some people, it's really shocking. But yes, we do training, and we'll do a couple of sessions. So we get them going, and then we'll schedule a follow up with them if they want it in a couple of weeks. Because it's like anything, you take in so much information, then you use it a couple of weeks later, then it's a little more, they understand it more. But it is
Right.
very intuitive. But it's a change, so you're going from some of the people, they got a lot of manual processes, and so you're coming out of that world into a world of automation. And so there's a little bit of a change, but it's fundamentally very intuitive and easy.
Okay. Fantastic. And then the last one is where can people find you? Like website, social media, events coming up?
Yeah, so all those things, bill360.com, and that's, you see it on my window here, it's
Yeah.
360. And we got Scaling New Heights. We'll be at booth 99 right when you come in. You won't miss us. We'll be there. And but yeah, all the social media, we're out there. Anton's here, and he runs all that. So we're in all those places too. And then
Yeah.
where
Any other events that you've got scheduled?
oh, that's right. We got Intuit Connect. That's coming.
Okay.
That's a big one for us too. And I'm sure a lot
That's
of
a big one.
your listeners, I'm sure that's a big one for them as
Yep.
well.
Absolutely.
So that's, I think, in October. Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Any parting thoughts? Last, anything we missed? I think we hit
No.
it all.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. I'm glad to make connection with you, and that you
Yeah.
served you had the uniform on too, and then we were sort of on that almost same timeline.
Yeah. It's
I
very
might
funny. You took yours a little bit further than I did, and both
yeah.
geographically and career wise. So,
Yeah, it just
but
happened for me. I wasn't any grand design there, believe me.
yeah.
So it just sort of happened. But
Yeah. Well,
but
thank you
anyway,
for your service and thank you for your time and
same.
have a safe trip to scaling and we'll see you there.
All right. Thank
All
you,
right.
Gary.
Thanks a
Good to
lot.
see you.